But we'll move on now to the next speaker. 3 years ago, I went to my first rare disease conference. I stopped at a table and somebody said to me, "Do you have data?" And I was a little clueless and said, "Well, I guess I'm supposed to." I quickly learned that as a patient group, one of the best and first things we can do is recruit patients to share, well, their stories basically under good scientific protocols to develop strong natural history data. But that's not easy. It's not cheap. And then we joined up with COMBINEDBrain, which is a consortium of lots of patient groups that have pooled resources to be laser focused on strategies that lead as straight as possible to better therapies for neurodevelopmental disorders. And they had put together a platform to collect some natural history that we could join. That we could have our patients join for free. Sarah is science officer at COMBINEDBrain and in fact directs COMBINEDBrain's cross or disorder natural history study. Sarah's PhD focused on cellular mechanisms of genetic epilepsies caused by mutations in the GABAergic signaling pathway. Sarah primarily studied a GABRG2 mutation associated with Dravet syndrome. She studied the role of protein degradation pathways like autophagy and the ubiquitin proteasome system in this disease pathophysiology. She's also worked extensively on projects involving SLC6A1 related neurodevelopmental disorders, including preclinical research on 4-phenylbutyrate, a repurposed FDA approved drug. So, Sarah, please take it away.
All right, thank you for that introduction. We'll share the screen here. All right, and so as Rebecca said, COMBINEDBrain is a group of over 140 different patient advocacy groups for rare genetic neurological conditions with a large focus on rare neurodevelopmental conditions. So today I'm going to be talking about natural history studies. First, I'm going to describe what a natural history study is, and then I'm going to talk about why they're important and why you would want to participate in them. And then I will talk about the study that COMBINEDBrain is running, which is the same one that the UGDH Foundation has partnered with. And then I will also share some preliminary data from this study. So what is a natural history study? It is basically, it's gathering information about all of the symptoms and medications, the procedures that one undergoes, everything related to a given disorder to just understand how it affects a person throughout their entire lifetime, from birth through diagnosis, through all the development of symptoms. Natural history studies can be with data that is created and entered by clinicians, or they can use patient and caregiver entered data or some combination of both. And so the study that I will be sharing data from at the second half of my talk is a lot of caregiver entered information from those of you on the call. So you might hear about patient registries, and you might be wondering how that is different from a natural history study. So a patient registry is a single point in time. It often will ask you to fill out your demographic information, such as name, age, what country you're in, maybe what genetic variant you have, and they might often ask about some of the symptoms that you have. But a natural history study is longitudinal, which means that we will keep coming back to you over and over again to ask about any new symptoms or changes in medication or what new milestones have been attained. And so by having this longitudinal repeat set of data, that allows us to get a better understanding of the trajectory and development of the disorder. So we might learn things about which people are predisposed to having seizures, what ages the seizure onset might be, if people will develop seizure freedom and when that would be. Learning about medications, we can learn from a natural history study what milestones might be attained and at what ages, etc. So what do we get out of a natural history study? There are three main things that I will discuss in more detail for each of them. First is just a general understanding of what is this rare disorder like. You can also understand the timeline of the disorder, the development and the ebbs and flows of different symptoms and their severities. And natural history studies also help you measure change in the disorder. So for understanding the disorder, you want to understand all of the different symptoms that might appear. We've already heard how seizures are very much at the forefront of everyone's mind for this disorder, but we also want to know what other symptoms might be present, whether it's something related to muscles or cardiorespiratory or digestive or vision, etc. Many of these genetic conditions affect far more than just the brain. So we want to understand that. And we want to understand the treatments that help, and also importantly, what does not help for a given disorder so that we can advise clinicians to stop using that and try something else that might be better for specifically UGDH. Lena talked a little bit about genotype-phenotype correlations. So that's just getting an understanding of if somebody has a particular type of UGDH variant, will it mean that they have a specific subset of symptoms? Lena had said that that doesn't look like UGDH has a strong genotype-phenotype correlation here, but we always want more data to confirm what the initial intuition is showing. Another thing a natural history study can do is show who is at risk for particular symptoms. So that might mean where if you have one set of symptoms that it puts you at risk for developing another set of symptoms later on, or maybe it'll be based on the age of onset. Maybe people who have a really early age of onset are going to be more likely to have more symptoms at a later age, while those who go longer without any symptoms might have fewer overall. These are all things that we need to learn from having the data. Natural history data can also help to develop clinical standards of care, which could be a document that you could bring to your clinician of like, hey, this is what UGDH syndrome is, and here is what the latest science is saying about how to treat that. That takes a lot of data to develop a good standard of care. That is a project that's often years in the making. We also want to understand the timeline of the disorder. So that's when symptoms start, if those symptoms are going to progress, or maybe they get better and go away even. We want to know how fast any of those changes might be. This could also be about different seizure types. Maybe you start with infantile spasms and then it changes to generalized tonic-clonic or other seizure types. We want to understand that. And then for clinical trials, it is really important to know what's called the optimal treatment window. That would be when people will respond best to a clinical trial in order to prevent future symptoms. It's often easier to prevent symptoms from developing than it is to make symptoms go away once they've started. And we also want to be able to measure change in a disorder. So if imagine that you have a wonderful clinical trial with a drug that really seems to be working, but you don't know how to measure that on a survey in a way that gives objective data, because for the pharmaceutical companies and the FDA or EMA, any of those regulatory bodies that determine whether a treatment gets approved or not, they need objective numbers and not just parents saying like, yes, this was a miracle for my child. You need to be able to put that into scientific measures. Another benefit of a natural history study is that you can get what's called a natural control group, where a traditional clinical trial would use a placebo control group. So this is people who are not yet able to receive the drug, and that's how you compare the group who does receive the treatment to see if it's working. But if you have really solid natural history data, then instead of having a placebo control group, you could compare to the existing body of evidence of what it normally looks like for an untreated individual. And as I've been saying, the natural history data is very, very important for clinical trials, both in order to determine if they're successful, but also to plan them out. Pharmaceutical companies and biotechnology companies will want to know what symptoms to target. Again, seizures are very important, but there might be other symptoms that they also think that their drug or gene therapy might target. And so they want to understand what those are so they can be monitoring them and measuring them. The companies will want to know what age groups to include. Ideally, hopefully, patients of all ages would be eligible for a clinical trial, but sometimes there are scientific reasons to limit the first trial to only a particular age, and so companies need to know that. They will also want to know how quickly will they know if a drug or treatment is working. And so in order to know that, they need to know what the progression of the disorder normally looks like. If a condition is rapidly changing, then they might be able to very quickly determine if their treatment is causing things to slow or stabilize. But some rare diseases are fairly stable, where you have your initial symptoms and then not much changes. And so it might be harder and take longer in order for a treatment to have a confirmed effect. And so companies just need to know this in order to plan out a trial. It would be horrible if a company planned a trial that was too short, and then they found out after the trial was over that they just weren't able to measure whether things were working or not. And so maybe the drug would have been really great for treating the disorder. They just didn't measure it right. And so that's why we want this really great sense of the timeline of the disorder. Outcome measures are the ways that you measure your symptoms and the severity of the disorder. There can be multiple different ways of measuring the exact same symptom, and not every way of measuring is going to be perfect for each disorder. So there might be, for seizures or for behavior, there are multiple different surveys out there that ask caregivers about the behavioral symptoms that their child is displaying. And you want to know which one is best for UGDH, because each survey is a little bit different. And then also companies will want to know about particular types of patients to enroll in the clinical trial. So that might be specific genetic variants, because some treatments will be targeted for one mechanism more than for a different mechanism. So they need to enroll the right sort of people, or it might be based on the symptoms that they think their treatment is going to be targeting. So on the left here, we see a traditional clinical trial where in pink, the placebo group is the just arbitrary measure of severity, where it's getting worse and worse over time. In green, you have the treatment group in this example clinical trial, and they do not develop as many symptoms. So you can see that the treatment group is doing better than the placebo control group. But what that means is a placebo would be people who are not receiving a treatment when they desperately want it. Another option could be on the right, a clinical trial with a natural history study as the control group. And so instead of having a placebo, you just compare to existing data that has been collected over years and years and years on what the disorder normally looks like for people who are not being treated. And then in the green, you would still have your treatment group, and you can compare between the two of them to see that, yes, this treatment is working. It is doing something that we've never seen before with the natural course of the disorder. And this is not just theoretical. This has been done for clinical trials before. So here is an example for spinal muscular atrophy, which is a very severe genetic condition that results in often the loss of milestones and very severe muscle weakness. And for the most severe types, it results in early mortality. The children will die. And they had the data to show at what ages are children dying. And so when they had the clinical trial, they thought it would be unethical to not treat these children with the treatment. And so they gave everybody the treatment. And what they found was that all of these children were living for years longer than had ever been seen before for SMA. And so that was part of the data that was used with the FDA in the US to approve this drug. And that's just one example of how natural history data has actually truly been used to get a drug approved. So we've talked about how important all the natural history data is. How do we actually collect it? At COMBINEDBrain, we went through multiple different platforms and evaluated them and chose a platform called Matrix at a company called Across Healthcare. This is a patient-centered platform, meaning that you as the caregiver or patient own and control your data, and you get to enter the data and control how it gets shared. And the caregiver can report directly on the patient at any time, because this is a digital natural history study, meaning it's a website that you log into. And so you don't need to find a clinical site where it might be difficult to travel to. You can just from your own home be participating in real scientific research. And for those of you who are in the US, you can also link your electronic health records so that we can have the additional context of the notes from your neurologist and your medication history, etc. We also use something called the CRID, the Clinical Research ID, as a way to anonymously link your data from this study to any other studies so that we can build a bigger data set and collaborate with other researchers. Matrix also allows clinicians to enter data directly. And so for the clinicians on the call, if you are seeing anybody with UGDH, then we can talk about whether you want to participate in this natural history study as well. This study is fully international. The map here I'm showing is for all of the people enrolled in COMBINEDBrain's cross disorder study. So we have over 60 different genetic disorders who are participating. And you can see that we have people from quite a large number of countries. I think it was 53 when I last counted. And we have our platform and some of the surveys available in different languages to help people in all of these countries participate in this study. And here are the validated studies or validated surveys that we are collecting on Matrix. We have this ClinGen head-to-toe set of surveys that is important for many rare diseases. We have the Vineland, which is used for neurodevelopmental disorders. We have a seizure survey. We have a milestone survey, and then a number of others. We have communication. This is a survey that was designed specifically for people with neurodevelopmental disorders. So it's really trying to capture all of the small but important milestones that a child might attain, even if they are not yet fully verbal. We have some behavior surveys and sleep and quality of life. So all of those are available on Matrix. Some of them have been translated into the languages I showed on the last slide. Unfortunately, some of them are only in English right now, but you can use your browser tools to auto-translate. So let's get into the data that we have for UGDH. There are 8 patients who have enrolled in the study, and we can see that half of them are in the United States, and then we also have participants from Argentina, Belgium, and the Netherlands. With the patients we have for the sex of the patients, it is 3 out of the 8 are female and 5 are male. And so that's looks like it might be close to 50-50 split. We just don't have the numbers yet to say for sure. And then age of the patients, 4 of the patients are under 5 years old. And we have 2 who are between 5 and 10, 1 patient who was between 10 and 15, and 1 patient who is between 15 and 20 years old. Here are the variants that I saw on the genetic reports that have been uploaded. So this was 6 of the participants had uploaded a genetic report. So that means we have 2 people who enrolled and made an account who have not uploaded a genetic report. It would be really helpful if you could provide yours. So what we see here is a lot of missense variants, but also a recurring nonsense variant and a splice site variant. And most of, or actually all of these were compound heterozygous individuals, meaning that each person had 2 different variants. This is showing the data from one of the ClinGen surveys. So that would have been the first survey that you were asked to complete when you created your account. And what we can see from this is even though it's a seizure and neurodevelopmental disorder, Jamuar syndrome affects multiple systems in the body. So we see that the eyes and vision was reported as being affected in many people. Muscles, and then there were a number of people who responded yes to kidneys, bladder, and genitals, and lungs and breathing, and then some other symptoms, behavior, bones, digestive system, etc. There were only a few symptom domains that people have so far said that they have not had any issue with. Looking at specifically the neurological symptoms that have been reported, we see that many patients are reporting a large number of symptoms. There's cognitive impairment was reported by everybody, coordination issues, hypotonia, and seizures. There was also many people reporting an abnormal EEG, encephalopathy, hypertonia, and unusual movements, as well as some people reporting memory impairment and anatomical problems with the brain or spinal cord and cerebral palsy. Looking specifically at seizures, here's some information about the burden of the seizures. This was asking, how often do seizures cause changes to your daily routine, or how often do your seizure medications cause changes to your daily routine because of side effects? And most people were responding that both seizures and the side effects of the seizure medications were impacting their day-to-day routines and activity, either some days or every day. There was only 1 participant each who said that there was not any change from that. And in fact, the person who said the seizures never affected their daily routine was somebody who said the side effects from the drugs did affect them every single day. So there was trade-offs there that in order to achieve seizure freedom, they had a high side effect burden. There were 4 patients who responded whether they had ever attained seizure freedom. 2 of them said no, 2 of them said yes. And Rebecca had told me that everyone wants to know about what drugs are best for seizures. Unfortunately, right now, we can't really say. This is only 2 people who have achieved seizure freedom and provided their medication history with us. So it's just not really enough to say yet. And so I would strongly encourage all of you to create an account and fill out the seizure surveys so that we can get a better understanding of this. And hopefully at the next symposium, then we will have concrete drug names to list. This here is data from the Vineland, which asks about a lot of the milestones and like development of children. So you can see that we have receptive language, how well do they understand what's spoken to them? Expressive language, how well are they able to communicate to others? And then coping skills and gross motor. And we can see that for each individual patient, that a lot of those skills are clustering together. What we don't know is what the developmental trajectory is like. So, because we just don't have enough data points on this graph yet. Does our data, is a typical child's development going to look like? Which of these lines here? We just don't know. And so we need you to complete the Vineland as well. So what can you do? You can create an account on Matrix, upload your genetic report, and complete all of the surveys that will show up on your dashboard. We especially want to know about the non-neurological symptoms. Rebecca had mentioned to me that some patients have cardiorespiratory issues and some kidney and bladder issues, but I just didn't have the data yet in order to really talk about that. So we strongly encourage you to complete those surveys so that we have a better understanding there. And then those of you who have taken the surveys, come back in 12 months and retake the survey so that we can understand what symptoms have changed and what medications have been effective for you. And those of you in the US, you can link your electronic health records. Here's the link to log into your account. I can put this link in the chat. I think it's also linked in the resources page. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Poliquin, for that great talk. I'll ask a question, Dr. Poliquin. For someone who has a dual diagnosis like we saw with Lucas and Isabel, how should they approach a natural history study?
Yeah, that's one of the situations where the genetic report becomes even more important than for everyone else. They will take the same set of surveys. A lot of the surveys in this study are designed to be used across many different genetic neurodevelopmental conditions. I mean, some of them even are for just broadly rare disease as a whole. So we would encourage people with dual diagnoses to still participate, but we do want to understand that maybe this person might be special and their symptoms might be a little bit different from most people with UGDH. And so that it just, as long as they provide their genetic report, then that information is there to the scientists who would be going through the data. So everyone can participate. We really want all of you.
So you mentioned some other groups, they have years and years of natural history study that help them out. And, um, we started recruiting for this in the past couple years. But let's say we have patients who are, near my son's age, 15, and we're able to tell you lots of, history from, day of birth to today. Does that help kind of supply that, does that help kind of catch us up? Does that supply helpful retroactive data that can kind of count toward, you know, is it basically, is it based on how far back we can supply data or when do we actually start doing the surveys? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the answer is it's some of both. It is really helpful to have that information from older patients. Some of these questions will ask about the age of symptom onset and the age of diagnosis. And so that means we're able to get the entire medical history of THAD. That's another reason to link the electronic health records from the providers that you have seen so that we can pull that in from all of the ages that he's been, where he has seen a medical provider. But it does not fully replace having the years of prospective natural history. We call it prospective, meaning it's starting now and being collected in a systematic way moving forward. because that can help us validate whether some of the outcome measures are going to work for specific people. It's important to be able to compare between responses between the same person across different time points. So yeah, yes and no. Like it's great to have that data and it does help, but it doesn't fully eliminate the need to be gathering this rich longitudinal data on a prospective basis. See a question in the chat. Is it possible to participate in these studies outside of the US? Yes, it is. The link that is in the chat, you can access it from any country in the world. It will ask you to verify your email. So you'll create an account and then you'll just go look in your email for the verification link. And then from there, anybody in all countries is able to participate. We have a number of different languages that are supported on the platform and for some of the surveys. So that includes Spanish, French, German, Italian, Hebrew, Korean, and Brazilian Portuguese. Russian, unfortunately, is not a language that we support at this time. But for most people, you can use the translation tools on your browser or on your phone in order to answer the survey questions, and every little bit of data helps. So even if you don't fully understand a question because of the weird translation, that's okay. It's rare disease. We will take any bit of data that we can get. The only thing that's limited to the US is the linking your electronic health records from your doctor.
We had a couple of patient families ask questions with Dr. Jamuar's talk about abnormal lab values like elevated bilirubin or elevated CK. Would you encourage families to share any abnormal labs that they get?
Yes, absolutely. And you have two options there. One of them is directly linking your electronic health records, but you can also upload any documents that you have. And so and this applies to people in any country, if you have a report from the lab values, a like PDF document or something like that, then you are able to upload that into Matrix. There's a whole section for documents. And so anything at all of value from your doctor or labs, etc., please link all of that. You can also upload EEGs. So I'm sure most of you have had an EEG done. That is something else that you can upload to your Matrix account, and it is available for researchers to analyze. If you need help with getting the EEGs or uploading them, then you can reach out to COMBINEDBrain and we will help you.
I want to point out too that for patients who can get to the US or who are in the US, we are also trying to recruit for biorepository collection, collect lab samples that can be helpful for research. And by participating in the COMBINEDBrain survey study, there is a survey there to consent to do the biorepository. It has almost everything you need to know. And so it's just a seamless way to become eligible for that if you also want to have the option to participate in research by donating lab samples.
I'll ask another question. I think the hope of everyone here is to see therapeutic developed for this disorder. So if and when that's developed, can the combined brain natural history study be used to track the efficacy of that?
Yes, it will definitely be useful for developing the clinical trial. Companies, again, um, they could access this data and use it to inform the development of what symptoms they're going to monitor and the outcome measures. Whether it can actually be used for a natural history control group will really depend on how thorough the data is. If we have data that is consistently being entered by people every 12 months, completing all of the surveys, that would give you a better chance than if we have people just kind of randomly, somebody signs in and completes like 2 or 3 surveys and then they never sign in again. And we have some other people who might log in and complete 5 surveys and then they don't come back for another 2 years, and then they complete some different surveys and don't give repeat answers to the original 5 surveys they filled out, then that data is very scattered, and it would be unlikely that the FDA would approve the use of that data as the control group. So we really need people to go in every year. You will get reminders through Matrix. It'll send you an email letting you know that you have that your survey, you need to go in and complete it again. And so if you do that, if you take all of the surveys and then in 12 months, you sign in again and take all of those same surveys again, and then another year goes by and you take those same surveys again, then that will get us closer towards that goal of being able to use the natural history as the control. I cannot guarantee that the FDA will accept anything, but that has been used before, and it has been from patient advocacy groups who have developed like very detailed natural history.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was a pleasure to get that kind of detail on this. Yeah, I've been talking about it with our family group over the past couple years, but emails from a non-scientist can only go so far. And so it was also really great to see the potential of what kind of, findings we can see from it. So thank you so much.